Should we fast during Easter and ordinary time? Yes. Yes, we should. Hello and welcome to Intermarifica, New Mexico, the place where we look at questions of wonder from the perspectives of both reason and faith, both theology and philosophy. I'm your host, Daniel Kelly, and welcome to our very first bonus episode. Normally we release episodes on every Tuesday, but sometimes when different subjects come up that generate enough interest, that sometimes it calls for a bonus episode. So this is our very first bonus episode. I hope you enjoy it. So the question for today is, first, should we fast during Easter? Easter is a time of joy and ordinary time. And then if we should, how? So the first question we can answer with a yes. Yes, we should fast. And for this, I'm going to just take some quotes from the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, their statement on penance and abstinence. So they say, forms and seasons of penance vary from time to time and from people to people, but the need for conversion and salvation is unchanging, as is the necessity that, confessing our sinfulness, we perform, personally and in community, acts of penance in pledge of our inward penitence and conversion. So there we see that we always have to do acts of penance, and also though that there's different seasons. So for penance, what are some of these seasons? Well, we've got seasons like there's times of, so we have seasons of feasting and festival, seasons like Easter or Christmas, or in fact every Sunday, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, or other solemnities like the Annunciation. And then we have times, specific times the church calls us to fast. Those would be things like Advent, Lent, or, every Friday. And we'll talk more about every Friday in a bit. And then there's that weird season where it's kind of both. The Triduum that we just passed it was most of the time we should have been fasting, but every day was a solemnity. And that's just kind of a weird one. So ordinarily we don't fast on feast days. So what are feast days? There's the highest type of feast day is a solemnity. Okay, and solemnities would be every Sunday is a solemnity, and then like March 25th, the Annunciation, that's a solemnity, and that even trumps Lent, right? It comes in the middle of Lent, and it kind of interrupts Lent there. And then a lower level would be a feast day. That would be like the Presentation, February 2nd. And then there's just ordinary memorials. Those don't kind of trump anything, and they're not these days of festival. And one of the solemnities we forget about a lot is the patron saint of whatever church we're in is automatically, their feast day is automatically a solemnity for us. So whatever your particular parish is, that would be a solemnity. So even during Lent, we don't fast ordinarily on feast days. We still, Lent and Advent, we're still supposed to do prayer and almsgiving. Those don't go away during that season, during Sundays. And then there would be, and I'll talk more in another video about fasting during Lent, my views on that. But one thing I want to point out is there could be things that we keep up during even the Sundays during Lent because it's more of a freedom issue and we need to keep it up to keep our freedom. For example, if I gave up looking at Facebook because I figured out that I'm just too attached to it, then it wouldn't make sense to look at it on Sundays, right? And when I do a Lenten fasting a video, maybe I'll talk more about that. But so stuff that restricts our freedom that we can't do without, we're too attached, that would be stuff we might continue even during the Sundays. So then during right now what we're in is the octave of Easter, that whole 8 days, and the octave of Christmas. These are 8 days that the whole thing is a day of festival. We're supposed to be, partying basically for 8 days, and ideally we wouldn't even work during those days. So one thing, what's important about entering into these seasons of festival or fast for the church? Well, there's a lot of different important things. One thing is, we're not supposed to think that God's magically going to make Easter's just going to be a happy time, and Lent, hard things are going to happen. That could be superstitious. The church knows and God knows that, right, there's still going to be births during Lent and funerals, people are going to die during Easter, stuff like that. But the thing that's really important is it makes our prayer, if we enter into these seasons, less subjective, right? It takes our prayer out of ourselves because, yeah, maybe I'm going through a really, really hard time, but the church says it's Easter, you're supposed to rejoice now. Or maybe I'm having a really happy time, I'm super happy and it's Lent. Okay, the church says, yeah, well, you're still supposed to have this penitence. And this is really important because it takes us out of ourselves and we tend to make absolutes of seasons in our life, like times of joy, we're like, oh, this joy is awesome, never gonna end. Or times of sadness, we're like, this is just so low. And the church's different seasons, if we live them, help not make an absolute out of these things that pass. All things shall pass. This too shall pass, right? Not just for sad things, we say this too shall pass for sad things, but also for happy things. So during Lent, we pray, fast, and give alms. Ideally, those are 3 things we're supposed to do. But what do we do now that Easter comes? Well, as we just heard from the USCCB, we're supposed to do penance at all times. The church has a roadmap for what this looks like during every day that I'm gonna show that to you. But first, is there anything we should carry over from Lent into Easter and then ordinary time after that? Yeah, we shouldn't, if we gave up a bad habit because we needed the grace of Lent to give up this thing that's actually a bad thing that we do, like gossiping or something like that, or something that's bad for our body, like we smoke too much and it's sinful how much we smoke or something like that. Well, definitely don't retake up those bad habits now that Easter. You're not like, okay, yay, now I can gossip. That doesn't make sense. So these are fasts, these kinds of bad things, but they're not sacrifices in the proper sense, because sacrifice is when we give up something good that we admit to be good, and I'm going to talk about this more, to God. We're like, I'm giving this up for love of you. So when we're giving up something bad, we should do that for love of God, but it's not sacrifice in the same way. Like the Israelites, take an easy example. You for the pure sacrifice, the good sacrifice, you give up the best lamb, not like a sick lamb, the best one, and that's what we're supposed to do for sacrifices, properly speaking. So the next category of things that we should continue into Easter and ordinary time, things that restrict our freedom, we should definitely try to keep those up in some way. And we talked about things that restrict our freedom, things we can't do without. If I can't take a drive without listening to the radio, that was a big one for me. That I used to give up every Lent because I just couldn't. I needed music on. Well, maybe we purified ourselves of that attachment during Lent. Well, don't just take it back up. We should continue in some way. For example, a lot of people give up social media for these times of penance, and you don't want to just fall right back into it. Like, I'm not just going to look at Facebook or whatever social media it is. Continue it in some way. One good way is if I finally rid myself of looking at my phone all the time, maybe only do it when you're at a desktop. So you're not just keeping that giving up thing during this time of festival, but you're also not just falling back to where it has a hold on you. Or think about, hey, on Fridays, I'm going to do all the things I did during Lent. I'm going to continue that. No Facebook on Fridays. This is something I gave up to. And then our Lents kind of stack up. We progress more and more because we're like, okay, I got rid of this attachment, and we progress in life. So that's one good thing. And then things that are straight sacrifice, like talked about, that are a good thing, it's purely good, we just sacrificed it for our love of God, we should definitely moderate during the Easter season, not have it as intense during Lent. For example, I know a lot of people who give up meat, all meat during Lent. You shouldn't continue that into Easter, that's not appropriate. But you could do it during Fridays, or other penitential days. There's other traditionally penitential days for the church. For example, Wednesdays is a traditional penitential day for the church, or Tuesdays when we pray the sorrowful mysteries in the church. That would be a good day to say, okay, on these specific days I'm going to give up that thing, whether it's meat or whatever good thing. Of course, we should also continue almsgiving and prayer in some way during Easter. We shouldn't just, oh good, I'm done with Lent. I don't have to pray anymore. I had one of my coworkers would faithfully go to Mass every single day during Lent, and then for Easter it's like, yeah, I don't have to go to Mass. Not even Sundays anymore. Just not even Easter Mass. Like, okay, I'm not going to Mass. They're going daily Mass, and then they're no more Mass. So we shouldn't do that. We should definitely continue prayer and almsgiving in some way. We should have some intentional prayer and almsgiving, and then spontaneous. We should have both. Spontaneous is like if I have my intentional almsgiving, I'm going to give this much to this thing, but then a relative suddenly needs help. I shouldn't be saying, well, I'm already doing my almsgiving thing. We should help them. Or maybe there's a homeless person, and we'll talk more about that in another video. So to help me during Easter and then during ordinary time, I do this each time the season switches, and I think it's very helpful, so I'm going to share it with you. To make myself intentional with that I keep fasting, praying, and giving alms, I write it down. Maybe some of you that doesn't make sense, but for me, I'm not going to do it unless I write it down specifically. On Fridays, I'm doing this. On Tuesdays, I'm doing this. This is the extra prayer. I'm going to read a chapter of the Bible every single day, and I write it down. And that could be maybe helpful to you. Or I'm going to write down for almsgiving, I know my daughter really wants help with this thing, and sometimes I get distracted. Specifically on maybe Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I'm going to take an hour to help her with this project that she's doing, something like that. And writing it out really, really helps me. Maybe you can try that, like in a journal or something, to make sure this specific time, because we want to be more specific and less general, because if we're like, oh, I'm going to help my daughter out more, that's not going to do anything, because we need specific to keep ourselves to it, if that makes sense. So another guide that I find really, really helpful for praying and fasting is this book right here. Is very, very good, the Manual of Indulgences. So we used to have these big books in the church of indulgences, and I'll do a whole video on indulgences later, but we had this huge thick book. But as the Manual of Indulgences says, when St. John Paul II revised all that, the easier it is to get indulgences and to help people out, the less people do it. And it's true. So now we've got this simple book, we simplified it, and there's less indulgences and whatnot. But there are 4 general indulgences that the popes give us that are supposed to transform our daily lives. And I want to read to you from this book. So first, to kind of explain what these 4 are. So it says, presented in the first place are 4 general concessions by which the Christian faithful are encouraged to infuse with the Christian spirit all the actions that go up to make up their daily lives, and to strive in the ordering of their lives towards the perfection of charity, right? So we can transform our whole lives with these 4 things that the church says we should be doing all the time. Okay, and it goes on to say, I'm reading down a bit. Owing to human weakness, such special acts are not frequent of these 4 that I'm going to mention. Should someone be devout and zealous enough to fill the day with such acts, he would justly merit, over and above the increase of grace, a fuller remission of punishment, and can bring in his charity more abundant aid to the souls in purgatory. So these are awesome, and these are a good place to start for what should I do for prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And there's actually a grant that corresponds to each one. So here's the grants. I'm going to read them to you, and maybe they can help inspire you for Easter and ordinary time, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So the first grant is partial indulgence is granted to the Christian faithful who, while carrying out their duties and enduring the hardships of life, raise their minds in humble trust to God and make, at least mentally, some pious invocation. So when we're just living our normal lives, doing what we need to do, there's ordinary hardships, we should have something specifically that helps us think of God, okay, by pious invocation. Like, Jesus, I trust in you. Or, Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, thy kingdom come, right? And just in the middle of that, I have a phrase Lord, you increase and I must decrease. I use that one a lot. When something's just hard, we just should have a habit of raising our minds to God. And that's a good one for thinking what kind of prayers we're going to do. The next grant that I want to read to you about, and it has all these Bible verses, that's what I'm flipping past to support each of these grants, and it's a really good book to read, and I'll do a whole episode on it later. The second general concession is a partial indulgence is granted to the faithful who, led by the Spirit of faith, give compassionately of themselves or of their goods to serve their brothers in need. Right? So we usually think of almsgiving as just giving of our goods. We give money or something. But almsgiving is, it doesn't put goods first, actually. The church says, give compassionately of themselves. So our time, talent, or treasure, we should make a specific commitment. I'm going to give this to this person of myself. And it could be goods too. The third one is, a partial indulgence is granted to the Christian faithful who, in a spirit of penance, voluntarily abstain from something that is licit for and pleasing to them. So see, this is what I was talking about before, sacrifice proper. It has to be something that we voluntarily abstain from something that is licit, so legal, I can do that, and pleasing to me. I like this thing, I like watching this TV, there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm going to give it up for love of God. So that's a part to think about, a sacrifice. How are we going to, a penance we could do. And then for the fourth one, and this was added recently because the popes and the church in her wisdom has said, this is something we're not doing enough. So we need to do it. So it's more recent than those other three. A partial indulgence is granted to the Christian faithful who, in the particular circumstances of daily life, so we're supposed to do it in particular circumstances of daily life, voluntarily give explicit witness to their faith before others. So explicit witness, it's very clear to other people, and I'm supposed to be doing this in my daily life, that this is my faith. I'm giving witness to that. So yeah, that's hard for us. And that's actually why this specific grant was made, because we don't have the courage that our fathers in faith did. It's harder for us, right? So those 4 grants I hope are helpful to help inspire you on how we should be just some actions we can take during Easter and ordinary time. So to sum up, I find it very helpful to be intentional with, we're going to pray, fast, and almsgive to some extent during Easter. We don't do it on Sundays, we don't do it during the octave, we're not going to, but we should continue some of our Lenten practice over. During Easter and ordinary time, we need to be intentional about it, to say this I'm specifically thinking, and then we should have some way to hold ourselves accountable. For me, it's writing. So I hope this episode was helpful to you, and God bless you during this Easter season. Happy Easter. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like button and drop a comment down below. If you really liked it, consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification so you never miss a video. If you want to help me produce more great videos just like this, please support me on Locals. There's a link in the description, and that you'll get all sorts of good benefits for being a part of our Locals community, and you'll help me produce these great videos. Thank you so much.